To really get a handle on the headlines coming out of Israel today, we've got to go back. And I don't just mean 75 years, I mean nearly 4,000. It's this incredible story of ancient kingdoms, global exiles, a powerful dream of return, and a modern state that's really been defined by both conflict and unbelievable innovation. So let's trace this thread all the way through to understand the forces shaping Israel right now.
So that's the big question, right? How can events from millennia ago have such a direct impact on the wars, the politics, and the very identity of Israel in the 21st century? As you're about to see, those ancient events, they aren't just history. They are living, breathing forces in the world today.
Okay, so our story really kicks off with this foundational connection between the Jewish people and this very specific strip of land. It's a bond that was forged way back in antiquity, and it's one that has somehow survived centuries and centuries of foreign rule and being scattered across the globe. When you look at this timeline, you see this powerful cycle just playing out over and over. Around 1000 BCE, you have a united Jewish monarchy that makes Jerusalem its capital and builds the first temple. But this sovereignty, it's really fragile. In 586 BCE, the Babylonians come in, destroy that temple, and force the first major exile. The Jews eventually return, they build a second temple, only for it to be destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE. And that kicks off this super long period where the land is ruled by one empire after another, Romans, Byzantines, and so on, until the Ottoman Empire takes control in 1517. And they would hold on to it for the next 400 years.
And that destruction by the Romans, that marks the beginning of what's called the Great Diaspora. The crucial point here is that while a small Jewish community always remained in the land, the vast majority were scattered across the entire globe. For almost 2,000 years, they built new lives as minorities everywhere from Europe to North Africa to Asia, all while holding on to this cultural and religious connection to a homeland most of them had never even seen. So that idea of return, which was kept alive for centuries in prayers and rituals, finally morphed into a modern political movement in the 19th century. This was the rise of Zionism, the organized political effort to re-establish a Jewish homeland. But look, this was not a simple return. It was really driven by modern forces. The Zionist movement first popped up in Europe, mostly as a response to rising anti-Semitism. Then you get a huge political breakthrough. In 1917, Great Britain, which had just taken control of the area after World War I, issues the Balfour Declaration, basically throwing its weight behind the idea. As more and more Jews immigrated in the 20s and 30s, so did violent tensions with the local Arab population. And then, the absolute catastrophe of the Holocaust. The systematic murder of 6 million Jews by Nazi Germany just created this undeniable global urgency for a sovereign Jewish state to exist as a place of refuge. There was no more debate. And that brings us to the pivotal moment. The modern state of Israel wasn't born into peace. No way. It was forged from its very first day in the crucible of war. And you can just see the chain reaction here step by step. In 1947, the UN proposes a plan to split the land into two states. The Jewish leadership accepts it, the Arab leadership rejects it. So on May 14th, 1948, Israel declares its independence. And the very next day, bam, the armies of 5 neighboring Arab countries invade. Now, Israel survived that war, but the fundamental conflict over the land and the right to even exist was cemented. This violent birth really set the stage for almost every war that followed. The decades that came next weren't a straight line at all. They were more like a roller coaster, this dizzying cycle of absolutely devastating wars, punctuated by these improbable, almost unbelievable breakthroughs for peace. Now, what's really fascinating is how 2 huge wars led to completely different outcomes. In 1967, Israel launched a preemptive strike and ended up capturing the West Bank and Gaza, which is when its control over Palestinian territories begins. But then, in 1973, a surprise attack on Yom Kippur, Judaism's holiest day, left the country profoundly shaken. Even though Israel ultimately fought back the invasion, the trauma of nearly being defeated shattered its sense of being invincible. And paradoxically, that is what paved the way for the first ever peace treaty with an Arab nation, Egypt, back in 1979. And this contrast, this push and pull, really defines the entire era. On one hand, you have these incredible diplomatic wins, peace with Egypt, then Jordan, and just recently the Abraham Accords, normalizing ties with 4 more Arab nations. But on the other hand, the hope of the Oslo Accords, which created a path for Palestinian self-governance, ultimately collapsed into a period of intense violence called the Second Intifada. And then Israel's withdrawal from Gaza in 2005 was followed just 2 years later by a Hamas takeover, leading to a blockade and, well, multiple wars. And all of this brings us right up to the present day, where Israel is facing this perfect storm of its deepest internal divisions and its most severe external threats, all at the same time.
So today, you're looking at a nation of about 10 million people with a Jewish majority and a pretty significant Arab minority. But here's the thing. That Jewish majority is not one big unified group. It's got these deep, deep societal rifts, especially between the mostly secular population and the rapidly growing ultra-Orthodox or Haredi community. And they are profoundly divided on huge questions. Who should serve in the military? What role should religion play in a modern democracy? I mean, these aren't just debates. They are core conflicts over the very soul of the state.
So while Israel was busy transforming its economy into the startup nation, this global tech powerhouse, its society was fracturing under the surface. And in 2023, that fracture just burst wide open. Massive countrywide protests erupted over the government's plan to overhaul the judiciary, a move that opponents saw as a direct threat to the country's democracy. For months, it really felt like the nation was tearing itself apart from the inside.
And then, right at that moment of peak internal division, the nation was shattered by an external attack. On October 7, 2023, Hamas militants stormed across the border from Gaza, killing 1,200 people and taking over 240 hostage. It was the deadliest single day for Jews since the Holocaust. This triggered a massive war in Gaza, but it quickly expanded. Hezbollah began daily attacks from Lebanon, and in 2024, Iran launched its first ever direct missile attack on Israel. All of a sudden, the nation found itself in a multi-front war against Iran and its proxies all across the region.
So, here we are, a nation whose story stretches across 4 millennia, from ancient kings to AI innovators. The entire 4,000-year arc of this story has led to this single, incredibly perilous moment. And the question of what comes next for this nation of ancient roots and deep modern rifts, that remains dangerously and completely unknown.